They're all in the minivan. They're always going to be in the minivan, but we're doing this anyway. And you can come with us and you're going to do this anyway. And I know, Fear, that your role in the family is that as we're on this road trip toward creativity or adventure, the new or the big new thing that we want to do, I understand that your role is to sit in the back and scream that we're all going to die. And you do it really well. And you just keep doing that. And we're going anyway. And I love you. And there's something about the I love you, you're welcome, you're part of this that somehow makes it quiet down. It doesn't go away. It just quiets. I think all it wants is to belong. Like the rest of us, it's just the part of you that doesn't believe that it belongs. And you just have to keep coming at it with that really mothering tone. And when I say mother, I don't mean the mother you actually had. I mean the universal, loving, compassionate, kind mother that you wish you had. The one who said, whatever happens, I love you. Whatever happens, you're welcome. Whether this is a success or a failure, you belong to me. You're mine.
That was the always inspiring Elizabeth Gilbert, #1 New York Times bestselling author, life guru, and today's podcast guest. Hi, I'm Celeste Headley. Welcome to Women Amplified from the Conferences for Women. This podcast brings you conversations with some of the most brilliant minds, offering you invaluable advice and inspiration to help you navigate life in both your career and at home. Before we get into today's episode, I have some really exciting news to share with you. So much is changing in our world every day, but one thing is very much here to stay. The Fall 2020 Conferences for Women will go on in highly interactive virtual experiences. And with a new online format, you're no longer limited by travel, so you can take advantage of all 3 amazing events. Registration for Texas, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts opens this month. And podcast listeners, if you take a short survey, it's at conferenceforwomen.org/survey, you'll be entered to win a free ticket to attend one of these incredible virtual events. So now, more exciting news, and that is today's podcast. Join us for an insightful and inspiring journey with Eat, Pray, Love phenomenon, Elizabeth Gilbert. Learn how to unleash your creative genius, amplify your voice with confidence, and also embrace fear. Let's get started.
Take it on my way. Gotta take it on my way.
One of the things that struck me immediately about going through your biography was how many jobs you've had. And some of them really have nothing to do, one would think, with writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if those are experiences that you just kind of tossed out, or if you think that there's stuff that you still sort of hold on to from all, like Cook on a Dude Ranch, which you've written quite a bit about.
Mm-hmm.
But some of these many, many jobs that you've had, what has stuck with you?
Well, part of it is just that I only have ever had an office job once in my life. And I worked for a summer at a chemical plant so worked with the secretaries as a filing assistant or something. And it was so horrifying for me. A decision was made that I can never, ever, ever, I will do anything, but I cannot have a 9-to-5 job. I will die if I have a 9-to-5 job. And so after that, I did do anything. That just kind of opened up the field. And I knew that I wanted to be a writer. So I was pursuing that. So a lot of those jobs were just about the jobs that were available. So that would be babysitting and being a diner waitress and being a bartender and work and a cook and a ranch hand. But truly, even to this day, I will do anything not to sit under fluorescent lights for 40 hours a week. I just can't do it. I just can't do it. I'll clean toilets before I do that and have done. So some of that diversity in jobs was just about how am I going to make money?
Yeah.
Necessity. And then some of it too was about gathering research because I knew that I wanted to write and I knew that I wanted to hear as many different kinds of people's voices as I possibly could. So the best job for that was being a diner waitress in the morning shift, and just having a parade of people come in all day and hearing the way they speak and seeing the way they engage. So I did think of it as research at the same time as money making. And I feel like it did go into the work. You probably just don't see it because you don't know where I'm getting those bits of dialogue from, but they're just mostly from those experiences.
So how do you go about writing? Like you get up, are you a morning writer or evening?
I'm a morning writer. Yeah.
So you get up, do you always write in the same place?
No. And I don't write every day. I write seasonally.
Interesting.
For me, the amount of work that it takes to create a book is mostly in the preparation, and the preparation takes years. Plus, by the time I'm finished with the book, I feel like I've left everything on the field and I don't have anything. So it's not like the next day I can sit down and start writing again. I have a friend, Hannah Tinty, who's a wonderful fiction writer. And she said something to me recently, like, after I finished writing that novel, I just felt I was so depleted. I was so empty. I didn't have anything. And I was like, good. That's actually how you should feel when you're done. And you should now not do anything for a couple of years, because it's going to take a while for that well to fill up again with the groundwater that's needed to have creativity. It's crazy to think that next week you should be able to pick up again. You don't have ideas. They're all in that last book. You don't have energy. They're all in that last book. So for me, it's seasonal. So I do an enormous amount of research, enormous amount of preparation, a lot of outlining of the plot and the story. And then I sit down to work. And then it's like being in the Marines in boot camp. It's just, I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I write all morning and I stare at the wall for the rest of the afternoon. And I go to sleep at 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night. And I do it again the next day until the book is done. And that is usually a very short period of time. It's a big, intensive blast. And then when it's done, it's going to take me a while to do it again.
It's interesting how many writers tell me that they had no idea how to handle any of the business end, that they felt unprepared to read contracts or didn't know that you don't get your book advance in one.
We're such idiots. We're like, all us artists, we're just like,
publisher clearing.
Isn't there going to be a big giant check that's going to come? Yeah.
And I wonder what that was like for you as you became more than a writer and a businesswoman. How was that transition?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. One is that I very unexpectedly earned a lot of money. And that's not something that I ever anticipated for my life. And I hadn't
You thought you'd be poor forever?
Well, not poor, because I think the word poor indicates it's different. Poverty is different from what I was expecting. I was expecting to be a working artist who supported herself with other jobs.
I see.
So that to me didn't mean poor. It meant frugal. Frugal, which fortunately I was raised that way. My family's very frugal.
Grew up on a farm, quite famously.
They're very tight and I wasn't raised with a lot of obsession with materiality. And I was raised by people who were very stubbornly independent. So I expected to have a life of being my own sugar daddy and my own patron, which would mean supporting myself however I needed to support myself. But that didn't feel frightening to me. That felt exciting and autonomous to me. But I never expected that I would have abundance, that I always knew that I would be able to take care of myself because I was raised to. I expected to, and I did. But I didn't think that I would be fucking rich, Like that was never my plan, nor as though when I told people when I was young that I wanted to be a writer, they were like, yeah, that's where the money is, kid. Yeah.
Your sister's a writer too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like that's where the big dollars are to be found is in creative writing. And then Eat, Pray, Love happened. And all of a sudden I was flooded with money, which was certainly is not a catastrophe. It's just a very interesting thing to figure out how to handle. And I handled it with mixed results in different ways. One way was that I decided that everyone I knew who was an artist and a creator also had to share in this abundance because they were just as talented. They just hadn't gotten as lucky. And so I went around like just giving money away to like all of my friends or buying them a house to live in or funding their project or doing. And that had mixed results. In some ways, some beautiful things came out of that. In some ways, some friendships were destroyed by that. Money is weird. It's a hard thing to navigate. I'm not saying poor me. I'm delighted that I had that great good fortune, but I had to learn how to restrain myself a little bit in some of my initial impulses, which was, this is our money. Like we were all going to be starving artists together. And now everyone's going to share in this at the same time. And that I've now learned to use it in different ways. I'm more likely now to throw my spotlight or my money behind organizations that are already very well established at doing good things with money, with boards of directors who know how to do it, rather than me just taking it into my own hands to do these outrageous acts on one-on-one giving, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend when, for instance, Planned Parenthood is out there doing great things and you can help them. Right? So like there's just other ways to do it at this point, but that just took a while to figure out.
Ever heard the quote from Rumi? Out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Well, great news. When it comes to work and life, even in current times, there truly is a place beyond ego where our work is transformed, our leadership philosophy modernized, and we can be free to walk through this messy world more skillfully. All this in a way that brings more peace for ourselves and greater impact with others. Not there yet? then you need to tune in to the No Ego podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen in. I will meet you there.
You're listening to a conversation with award-winning writer Elizabeth Gilbert. If you enjoy this podcast, spread the wealth, spread the joy. Share it with one person that you know who might benefit from a little advice and a little inspiration to navigate both work and life. Also, let others know that the Fall 2020 Conferences for Women will go on. We will have highly interactive virtual experiences for you. Registration for Pennsylvania, Texas, and Massachusetts is now open. So go online, get your tickets now for one or even all of these upcoming events. And podcast listeners, we have a special treat for you. We have an exclusive opportunity for you to attend one of the conferences for free. All you have to do is take a short listener survey at conferencesforwomen.org/survey. And then you'll be entered to win a free ticket to one of the virtual fall events. That's conferencesforwomen.org/survey. Your responses will also help us tailor this show so that we can meet your needs. So please share your feedback. And now let's get back to our conversation.
That can't be the only sort of surreal part of your life, right? I mean, there's also the fact that Eat, Pray, Love was very confessional. And then you must have people that come up to you on the street and feel like they know you after reading your writing.
Well, they do. That's not insanity on their part. That doesn't feel surreal to me because they do know me and they continue to know me because I continue to be confessional. And I'm really open on social media about my life and about my emotional experiences. And if I meet you at a bus stop for 5 minutes, I'm going to hopefully have a real conversation with you about your life and mine. I've never been a private person. And so I don't think those people are crazy when they come up to me and say, this sounds really insane, but I feel as though I know you. No, I'm the one who told you everything about myself. So you're not delusional. You actually really do have a pretty good idea of what I'm like and who I am. The reason this conversation feels awkward, and I've said this a million times to people, is because I don't know you, and so there's an imbalance. And that's why it feels strange, because you feel a sort of kinship to me, but I don't know you. So let's narrow that. And why don't you tell me some stuff about you so that we actually can be on a more equal footing? And I'm actually interested in knowing about you. So now let's talk about you. And that seems to make it go a little less awkwardly.
What effect does that have on your energy? Is it tiring to be emotionally engaged with so many people?
I don't want to close it off. So I've had to learn how to do it in a way that's healthy and reasonable, within reason. For somebody who's an oversharer by nature, not doing book signing lines has helped a lot. That's the one thing that I've changed, is that I don't do that anymore, because sitting at a table and having that level of intimacy and expectation with 500 people in a row is really not possible. But the problem is that I want to. And then I leave from there and I'm really tired. But social media becomes that, where I can actually have that sort of engagement intimately with people. I can respond to their responses. We can start conversations up. Other people can come into that dialogue. And that's something you can choose to dip into at any time of day when you feel like it. It's not as immediate as the book signing line, for instance.
Do you have to make a choice, though, every time you reveal very deeply personal things? And when your partner died, was that a conscious choice?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm smiling and I'm laughing because everyone else is so much more protective of my privacy than I am, including you at this moment. You're concerned with look, I just never was a private person. I think that's the odd thing, is that I always say that I have the soul of a very serious novelist and a very serious literary person, but I have the personality of an airline hostess, an aerobics instructor, basically. I really do want to constantly be engaged with people. I always did. Even as a little kid, it's who I am. It's my nature. I'm very...
Oddly, though, you had no neighbors on the farm, right?
I know, and it was terrible. And my dream was always to live in town. We lived on a farm and I was so jealous of those kids who lived in town who could ride bikes to each other's houses. And so I've sort of become a kid who lives in town. I now live in New York City and I am really active in the world because that's what I longed for. There just were not enough people around for my taste.
So let's pivot and talk about the work, shall we?
Yeah.
You wrote Big Magic before you launched the podcast, and it makes me wonder, what have you learned from people from interviewing them that you might want to add into the book?
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I probably should have done it the other way, huh? Although,
the book's great.
Thanks. Well, the book really came because of the TED Talk that I gave about creativity.
One of the most popular of all time.
Really was very popular and caused people, it kind of opened up this second career for me, because until that point, Eat, Pray, Love plus the TED Talk opened up this other avenue for me of people wanting advice about their journeys, for lack of a better word, their creative endeavors. They're wanting permission slips, really, to travel, to get divorced, to try something new, to dare to define themselves as an artist, to want more. I feel like I'm really just a big walking permission slip that goes around the world telling people, particularly women, 98% of my readers are women, that it's okay. That yes, I do also think that you should write a book. Yes, I do also think that you are allowed to want more for yourself than this marriage is giving you. I agree. Do you want an authority figure to say that it's okay for you to take a risk or to change your life? I am delighted to provide that role in your life. Until you have the courage to be your own permission slip, I'm happy to be it for you. And so I think Big Magic was just about codifying that in a way, so that there was a book that I could hand people that could say, here's all the permission that I want to give you.
Here's your FAQs.
Yes, exactly. And here are some things that I've learned. Here are some obstacles and fears that I'm bet that you're probably having. Here are some ways to deal with that. Here are some ways to talk to the reptile brain to make it settle down so that your creative brain can get out of fear and into innovation. And here's some encouragement. And then the podcast taught me, again, not that I didn't know this already, but there really is only one reason that people don't create, and it's because they're afraid. And that's only ever the reason. And in all the other excuses that we give and all the other obstacles that we have, I just have to scratch them with the tiniest fingernail. And underneath it, I'm just going to see our old friend fear showing up in all his different disguises to tell you that you're not worthy, that you don't have time, that you don't have the right degrees, that the best work is behind you, that you're too old, that no one cares, that it's not, all of that is just fear, the thousand faces of fear showing up again and again to tell you to stay small. And so the podcast was just about trying to help people get on the other side of that.
I was really interested to find out that a huge percentage of book contracts are never fulfilled. People will get a book advance and have to return it because they don't write the book. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you're saying that even at that point, even after they've sold a book, it would be fear that held them back.
Sure. Or how about your second one? Even as you are writing, even if you finish your first one, I guarantee you that you've got a monstrous terrorist living in your head telling you that you will never do a second one, that this one is going to bomb and that you'll never get you only ever had one idea in your mind. It never stops. And it's that way with your 10th book too. I'm here to deliver the bad news, that it doesn't go away. And I think we live in a society that really fetishizes the idea of being fearless. And that you're constantly being told that in various really violent, almost aggressive language to kick fear in the ass and to punch it in the face and to show it who's boss and to wrestle it to the ground. It's this constant war. The language is one of war. But in my experience, anytime I have fought against my fear, it has won because it fights back harder. It just digs in and it shows me who's boss, which is it. And the only way that I've ever been able to, air quotes, conquer it has been to allow it to exist. And to come with it a much softer energy and to see it for what it is, which is not really a terrorist monster, but an orphaned child, a small little part of you that just is so fearful, and to just mother it and to say, look, I can see that you're really scared. And I see that you don't think that you're worthy. And I see that you're terrified that this whole thing is going to bomb and blow up and that everyone's going to know that you're a fraud. And I acknowledge and respect that as being very real. And you are part of this family. You, fear, are part of this family and you have a place here. And you're just as much part of the family as creativity is. You're just as much part of the family as longing and all the other human emotions. I will never tell you to leave. It will never tell you to leave. You get to be in the minivan with the rest of the family. I just can't let you drive because you're 7 years old. You're 7 years old. You're too little. You're not allowed to drive. You can be with us, but we're going to go on this road trip. You're going to have to sit in the back with the other kids. Anxiety, panic, terror, all of them. They're all in the minivan. They're always going to be in the minivan, but we're doing this anyway. And you can come with us and you're going to do this anyway. And I know fear that your role in the family is that as we're on this road trip toward creativity or adventure, the new or the big new thing that we want to do, I understand that your role is to sit in the back and scream that we're all going to die. And you do it really well. And you just keep doing that. And we're going anyway. And I love you. And there's something about the I love you, you're welcome, you're part of this that somehow makes it quiet down. It doesn't go away. It just quiets. I think all it wants is to belong. Like the rest of us, it's just the part of you that doesn't believe that it belongs. And you just have to keep coming at it with that really mothering tone. And when I say mother, I don't mean the mother you actually had. I mean the universal, loving, compassionate, kind mother that you wish you had. The one who said, whatever happens, I love you. Whatever happens, you're welcome. Whether this is a success or a failure, you belong to me, you're mine. That sort of language that we have to learn how to bring to ourselves, because all too often we actually didn't get that when we were kids, because we were raised by people who themselves were terrified. So it's just a love contest, really, in the end, I think. And it's not the way that our culture teaches you to deal with fear, but it's the only way I've ever been able to get anything done.
So I wonder what the difference is in the challenge. Please forgive me and correct me if I get this wrong, but I think you were the first one since like Norman Mailer to be an unpublished author that got a piece in the New Yorker.
In Esquire.
In Esquire.
The New Yorker still won't have me, but Esquire.
Well, New Yorker listeners.
I keep trying. I keep knocking on that door. Esquire, yeah.
And I wonder, what is the difference of the task between a short story and a novel?
Honestly, I think it's the same. And I also think it's the same between a nonfiction book and a fiction book.
That was my next question.
I also think it's the same between a memoir and a biography. And I think I can really say that with some assurance because I've written all of them.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same writing a poem. I think it's the same process. And I think another way that fear manifests itself in the creative life is to make these big distinctions between these things, when actually really it's always the same process, always. And there's really only one job. And the job is, can you get on the other side of fear? That's it. And then it's the same. Telling a story is telling a story, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, memoir or biography. The question that I have after, once I've managed to do it and run around fear as best I can, is who am I talking to? And that's for me a very real question.
You picture a real person?
And it has to be somebody I know. Who is this book for? Who am I telling this story to? And that's the best piece of writing advice that I could ever give, is that everything that you write should be written to one person only. I often ask people when they're working on projects, who are you writing to? And they'll give me a demographic, like women between the ages of 30 and 45 who are having career. I'm like, that's not a person. And so your book's going to sound like it's written to a demographic. Write to a human being. Pick one person who you know, who you ideally love, who you care about, who you want to delight or inform or help or reach. And then directly, as though you are writing a letter, write that book to them. And every book that I've ever written has been written to one human being.
Do they all know?
Some of them don't know. I think that when I wrote my book, The Last American Man, I wrote it to a guy named Andrew Corsello, who's a friend of mine who used to be a colleague of mine at GQ. And he was the one person in the world who I thought would be most delighted by this story if I told it right. And so I wrote it to him, and I respect him as a writer. So I wanted to write in a way that impressed him. I don't even know if he knows that, but yeah, I wrote that whole book.
He might know.
He might now. Yeah, exactly. But I wrote The Signature of All Things to my fourth grade teacher, Ms. Sandy Carpenter, who was the first feminist I ever met, and who was somebody who introduced us all at the age of 9 to Hemingway and to literature, and who's still, she's almost 80, is still one of the most passionate and widely read consumers of literature that I know. She's the one who will call me and say, have you read The Goldfinch yet? What do you think? What do you think of the new Franzen book? What do you think of the new,
awesome.
And so I wanted to delight her with a really big, juicy, classical kind of 19th century novel that I knew she would love. If I'd written that book to Andrew Corsello rather than her, it would be a totally different book. So who you're speaking to changes the tone of your voice. You know this. Everyone that you talk to differently because different level of intellect or different level of interest. And so that's how you humanize your writing.
And I also read that you regularly, every so often, redo the program, The Artist's Way, which is a 12-week course. It's been around for a very, very long time. And I wonder why you do that. What do you still get out of it?
I'm a different person every minute. I'm a woman. I'm a different person every day. I fluctuate and my life fluctuates and my priorities change and my desires change. And I need to check in with myself. And The Artist's Way is a really good, solid program that will help you ask some really searching questions of yourself about what you want to do next. I often say, because it's true, that Eat, Pray, Love wouldn't have existed without The Artist's Way. It was doing that work and doing that program that got me to a place. It helps you really narrow in on what you really want to be doing. And she asks you every day in various different ways as you're doing these exercises. In a perfect world, if you had unlimited resources, if you had unlimited time, if you had unlimited support, what would you want to be doing? What skills do you wish that you had? What talents do you wish you had fostered? And for me, after I did that and went back and read everything I'd been writing for those 12 weeks, almost on every single page, it said that I want to speak Italian. I want to speak Italian. And I didn't know that about myself. There are things about yourself that you don't know until you take the time to really drive in your attention and see what's happening in your consciousness. And I came away from that like, wow, I guess I really want to learn Italian. I had no idea this was such a prevalent desire, and that's a doable thing.
And now, buongiorno.
And buongiorno. Unfortunately, ho dimenticato tutto il mio italiano because it's been like 10 years since I was living in Rome. But I did go and take it on, and I started taking night classes, and I had nothing that I was aiming toward. There was nothing that it was for. It was because I just wanted it. I didn't have a project around it.
Why is that important?
I think that in our brutal, capitalistic, productivity-minded society, you're not allowed to do something unless it's for something, unless there's some idealized, monetized, you either have to be doing it because you're going to change the world with it or because you're going to make money from it or because it will benefit your career. I didn't have there's no economic payout for me in learning Italian. I just wanted that language in my mouth, in my mind. And so I started taking night classes in it. And after 6 months of that, it's like, I need to go to Italy. I need to be speaking Italian in Italy. And from that, Eat, Pray, Love was born. And that all came out of The Artist's Way. So I obviously can't recommend it highly enough.
So I wanted to actually read you a couple of things that you've said that interested me.
Oh, I have no idea what you're about to say.
So here's something that you said on your writing schedule. I won't read the whole thing, but you say, my life's divided into times when I'm actively writing a book and times when I'm not. I'm only actively writing a book once every 3 or 4 years, which you explained. Mm-hmm. But you said, it's a militaristic thing, the early hours. Mm-hmm. I really want to be uninterrupted. The world doesn't wake up in a way that bothers you until 9 a.m. And that's when the phone starts ringing, emails and texts start coming in. Really interested in that word militaristic. And you used it before. You said it was like going to boot camp. Mm-hmm. Is that how you sort of see that discipline of that getting to that table every day?
Yeah.
It is.
I do. And I say it lovingly. And the rest of, I think part of the reason that I only do that every 3 or 4 years is because it's so intense. I know I could not sustain that over a long period of time. It would be like doing a marathon every month. You just can't. But during that precious, sacred time of writing, the best way that I can honor it is with that kind of militaristic discipline. I love it. I never feel happier than in that space. But one of the reasons is, it's probably the same reason that people go and shave their heads and follow gurus and join weird cults, is because secretly there are times when all we want are rules. So much of there's no ground under your feet in life so much of the rest of the time. And it's also ephemeral and you don't know how you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do. And so I'm also thinking of a friend of mine who had a child who had a lot of attention deficit disorder trouble and was going to a Montessori school where it was just the wrong place for this kid because there was no structure. And these were hippie parents who were like, we want our kid to just find his own way. And meanwhile, he's going out of his mind and driving everyone out of his mind. And someone had the brilliant idea to send him to the most rigid Catholic school in the city. And all of a sudden he thrived because he was like, oh, you mean sit at the desk this way with your pencil sharpened here? Thank you. I was just wondering what we're supposed to be doing. I need the rules. I need the discipline. And I'm kind of like that too when it comes to creativity. When I set that discipline for myself, your alarm will go off at 4:30 in the morning and you will be up at that desk and you will be in bed at 8 o'clock. I blossom in that. And out of that comes limitless grounds for imagination. I think one of the sort of myths about artists is that we do well in open space where you can do whatever you want. No, we do well in disciplined space. That's where actually the creativity we do well with deadlines often. We do well with a gun at your head saying you've got to get this done by 7 o'clock in the morning. We like that.
Hopefully metaphorical.
Yeah. Yes, please. Although it was Updike, one of the Johns, McPhee, one of them, one of the Johns said, Steinbeck, I think it was, said, what I really want is to just hire someone to stand behind me with a gun in my head saying, you have to get this many pages written. And I think that's what editors are for.
Absolutely. So here's another quote that this is you talking about the newest book. And you say, I feel like this book is my version of a time that's not dissimilar to how people were feeling in 1940. There's a tremendous cloud of dread hanging over the entire dumpster fire of the world right now. I don't know anybody who's not stressed and anxious and depressed. What I wanted to give at this moment is a book that would go down like a tray of champagne cocktails. But the book is all about mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And it occurs to me, aren't mistakes the things that usually make us anxious?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think of this book also as a bran muffin that's frosted to look like a cupcake. So it's about New York City in the 1940s. It's about showgirls and playboys and dancers and actresses. It's about sex. It's about pleasure. It's about the theater. It's about musicals. It's about all this kind of light stuff. But then, and that's how I trick you to read it. But then underneath that is the bran muffin, which is that it's about shame and it's about mistakes and it's about self-acceptance. And it's about particularly about women's sexual shame. And it's about a young girl who, very much like me, was very sexually adventurous and had to find her own limits by the only way that many of us can find our own limits, which is by hurting people and realizing that you've gone too far and that you can't do anything about this terrible, grievous harm that you've caused. And then what are you going to do now? How are you going to reconcile that with the rest of your life? What do you do with people who won't forgive you? Because we all have that in our lives. What do you do when there's somebody that you've harmed who doesn't want to have any contact with you? Where do you then find the grace to move on? How do you get that internally when you don't get it externally? I think these are all questions that a lot of us have grappled with in our lives. And so underneath the frosting of the showboat kind of era, I hope that it's still a really entertaining book, but I also hope that women will take away the central message of it, which is that there's a line in the book where she says at some point in a woman's life, she gets tired of being ashamed all the time, and then she can be who she truly is.
So let me end the interview by asking you the same question you asked me before we came in the room, which is, what are you most passionate about right now?
It was excited.
Excited about right now.
Yeah, that's the word, because I actually think passion sometimes is a trap in a culture where you're always told to follow your passion. Lots of times people don't have it. It can make them, that's question can make people anxious because we're all supposed to have some grand passion that is also supposed to be changing the world. That's also supposed to be monetized.
Sometimes my passion is nachos.
Yeah, exactly. But excited is a lighter word and also can change by the day. And I would say for me, what I'm most excited about right now in my life is entering into my 50s. And I am so excited to be a 50-year-old woman. I am so excited to have earned a certain amount of wisdom and experience and humor about my life. I'm so excited to get to answer questions by saying, as a woman in my 50s, I can say, I feel like it just gives me this gravitas that I feel like is very hard earned. And I know I'm alone. I don't have a partner. I don't have kids. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about being this new species of woman who gets to be alone, independent, autonomous, a traveler, a writer, a creator, a supporter of other women. And I'm excited about that. It just feels like there's a lot of power and a lot of joy in that.
Elizabeth Gilbert, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on. I delighted in it.
That was Elizabeth Gilbert, #1 New York Times bestselling author, life guru, and today's podcast guest, sharing her wisdom, her experience, always her sense of humor. If you haven't read her books, definitely put them on your summer reading list. You can learn more about her work. Visit elizabethgilbert.com. The Conferences for Women is the largest network of women's conferences in the nation. They draw more than 45,000 women and men to annual events in Boston, Philadelphia, Austin, and Silicon Valley. Be sure to check out the virtual Conferences for Women that are scheduled for fall of 2020. I'm Celeste Headley. You've been listening to Women Amplified for the Conferences for Women. Thank you so much for listening. Be kind and be well.